A king once ordered an entire river to be punished. Not metaphorically. Not symbolically. He had his soldiers whip the water, chain it, and declare it guilty of disobedience. To modern ears, it sounds insane. But in the ancient world, absolute power often blurred the line between ruler and God. History remembers many great kings. Builders of empires. Founders of civilizations. But behind the marble statues and heroic legends lies a darker truth. Some of the most powerful rulers in human history were also among the most terrifying. Their names inspired loyalty, but also unimaginable fear. Entire cities trembled when their armies appeared on the horizon. Laws became weapons. Mercy became weakness. And their decisions shaped the fate of millions. Tonight, we explore three of the most brutal rulers of the ancient world, men whose ambition reshaped continents, and whose cruelty became legend. But the deeper historians look into their stories, the more disturbing the picture becomes. Because these were not monsters hiding in the shadows. They were kings worshipped by their people. And sometimes, that made them far more dangerous. Our story begins nearly 2,600 years ago in the powerful Empire of Persia. At its peak, the Persian Empire stretched across 3 continents. From the deserts of Egypt to the mountains of Central Asia. From the Indus River to the shores of the Mediterranean. It was the largest empire the world had ever seen. And ruling this colossal domain was a king who believed the universe itself had granted him authority. His name was Xerxes I. To his followers, he was the king of kings. To his enemies, he was something else entirely. Ancient historians describe a ruler capable of unimaginable rage. When a violent storm destroyed a massive bridge he had ordered built across the Hellespont, Xerxes reportedly commanded his soldiers to punish the sea itself. They lashed the water hundreds of times with chains and whips. Then they threw shackles into the waves, as if imprisoning the ocean. To many modern historians, the story sounds absurd. But to Xerxes, nature had defied his command. And defiance was something he would never tolerate. This mentality defined his reign. Cities that resisted Persian rule were destroyed. Populations enslaved. Entire cultures erased from maps that had existed for centuries. Yet Xerxes was not unique. Across the ancient world, similar rulers emerged, men whose power was so absolute that no law, no morality, and no human life could stand in their way. In China, one emperor would bury scholars alive. In Rome, another would turn executions into public entertainment. But their brutality was not random. It followed a pattern. A disturbing psychological transformation that historians now believe may be almost inevitable when one person gains total, unquestioned power. And that raises a chilling question. Were these rulers simply evil men? Or were they the natural result of a system that placed a single human being above all others? Because if history has taught us anything, it's that the line between a king and a tyrant can disappear faster than any empire can rise. If Xerxes revealed how absolute power could erupt in moments of rage, the next ruler showed something far more calculated. Cruelty, not as emotion, but as strategy. His name was Qin Shi Huang. More than 2,200 years ago, China was not a single nation. It was a battlefield of rival kingdoms locked in endless war. Cities burned. Alliances shifted. Entire dynasties vanished in decades. Out of this chaos rose a young king from the state of Qin. At just 13 years old, he inherited the throne. By the age of 38, he had conquered every rival kingdom and declared himself something no Chinese ruler had ever claimed before. The first emperor. But unifying China was only the beginning. What followed was one of the most radical transformations in ancient history. Qin Shi Huang standardized the Chinese writing system, unified currency, built massive road networks, and began constructing what would later become the foundation of the Great Wall of China. To many historians, these were the foundations of Chinese civilization. But the cost was staggering. Hundreds of thousands of laborers were forced into brutal construction projects. Entire villages were emptied to feed the emperor's ambition. Many workers died building the early walls and roads, their bodies buried beneath the stone foundations. Yet Qin Shi Huang's most disturbing actions were not physical. They were intellectual. The emperor feared something more dangerous than invading armies. Ideas. Confucian scholars criticized his rule, warning that tyranny would destroy the moral foundation of society. In response, the emperor issued one of the most infamous decrees in ancient history. Books were burned across the empire. Philosophical texts, historical records, teachings that challenged imperial authority. Anything that contradicted the emperor's vision of the world vanished in flames. Then came something even darker. According to several historical accounts, hundreds of scholars were buried alive. The goal was clear: erase dissent not just from the present, but from history itself. And it worked. For generations, knowledge vanished. Philosophical traditions disappeared. Entire schools of thought were nearly lost forever. But Qin Shi Huang had one final obsession, one that revealed a deeper psychological mechanism behind his rule. He feared death. Despite commanding the most powerful empire on earth, the emperor became obsessed with immortality. He sent expeditions across the seas searching for magical elixirs that could grant eternal life. Ironically, the potions he consumed often contained mercury, a substance now known to be highly toxic. Many historians believe the very elixirs meant to make him immortal slowly poisoned him instead. Yet his paranoia continued to grow. In preparation for death, he ordered the construction of one of the most astonishing archaeological discoveries in human history: an underground army of more than 8,000 life-size soldiers. The Terracotta Army. Each statue unique. Each warrior built to guard him in the afterlife. But this discovery raises a deeper mystery. Why do so many ancient rulers follow the same path? Conquest. Absolute power. Fear of dissent. And eventually, fear of death itself. Because the third king in our story would take this pattern to an even darker place. A ruler whose cruelty was so theatrical that centuries later, his name would still symbolize madness. And when historians examine his reign, they uncover something deeply unsettling. The ancient world didn't just create tyrants. Sometimes it celebrated them. Power can corrupt a man. But sometimes, power does something far stranger. It turns cruelty into entertainment. Nearly 2,000 years after the rise of Persia and centuries after the unification of China, another empire dominated the known world: the Roman Empire. Its roads connected continents. Its armies crushed rebellions from Britain to the Middle East. Its cities were monuments to engineering, architecture, and law. But beneath the grandeur of Rome was a political system that placed unimaginable authority in the hands of one person: the emperor. And few emperors revealed the darkest possibilities of that system more clearly than Caligula. When he first came to power in 37 AD, the people of Rome celebrated. The young ruler seemed generous, charismatic, even compassionate. Crowds filled the streets cheering his name. For a brief moment, it looked like Rome had found the perfect leader. Then something changed. Historians still debate what happened. Some believe he suffered a severe illness early in his reign that may have damaged his brain. Others argue that absolute power simply stripped away every restraint that once held him back. What followed shocked even the brutal standards of ancient Rome. Caligula began executing political rivals without trial. Senators, men who once governed the empire, were humiliated, tortured, and killed for minor offenses. But cruelty alone was not enough. Caligula seemed to enjoy turning power into spectacle. Executions were sometimes staged as entertainment for the court. Prisoners were forced into grotesque performances before being killed. One famous account even claims the emperor considered making his favorite horse a Roman consul, one of the highest political offices in the empire. Historians still debate whether this story is exaggerated. But the symbolism is undeniable. It demonstrated how meaningless traditional power structures had become under absolute rule. And yet, despite the madness, the Roman Empire did not immediately collapse. The machinery of power kept turning. Armies still marched. Taxes were still collected. Cities continued to function. Which raises a disturbing realization. Civilizations are often strong enough to survive tyrants. But that strength comes with a cost. Because systems that tolerate unlimited power can eventually produce rulers who push cruelty further than anyone imagined possible. In 41 AD, after only 4 years on the throne, Caligula's own guards assassinated him. Even in the brutal world of Roman politics, his rule had become too dangerous. But history rarely learns its lessons the first time. Across centuries and continents, the same pattern continues to appear. A powerful leader rises. Authority expands. Criticism disappears. Fear replaces loyalty. And slowly, the line between ruler and tyrant vanishes. These 3 kings were not the only brutal rulers in history. But they reveal something essential about human civilization. Empires rise on ambition. They expand through power. But when that power becomes absolute, even kings can become prisoners of their own authority. And the most dangerous throne in the world may not be the one surrounded by enemies. It may be the one where no one is allowed to say no. Because history shows us a truth that is both ancient and terrifyingly modern. The moment a ruler believes they are above all others, the empire has already begun to fall.